In the early hours of Sunday morning in November 2022, a brutal and seemingly senseless act of violence shattered the small college town of Moscow. Four University of Idaho students, Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, were brutally murdered in their home. The case remained a mystery for months until wild-eyed criminology student Bryan Kohberger was finally arrested. But with his recent sentencing and the release of new court documents, a truly bizarre and chilling picture of Kohberger's actions has emerged. In this video, we'll dive into the newly released details of this case, from his unsettling behavior before the murders to the peculiar habits that ultimately helped investigators link him to the crime, and the absolute brutality that occurred that night. Long before the night of the murders, new court documents suggest Bryan Kohberger's interest in the victims may have been more than a passing curiosity. One of the victims, Kaylee Goncalves, told her roommates that she had seen a creepy man staring at her from a hill behind the house weeks before the murders. The friends were so unsettled by this account that they began to suspect she had a stalker. In another strange incident, just 9 days before the attack, the roommates came home to find their front door hanging open and the hinges were damaged. Concerned, they armed themselves with golf clubs, and Xana Kernodle's father was called to fix the door. Further evidence reveals a chilling pattern of premeditation on Kohberger's part. In the months leading up to the crime, Kohberger purchased a K-bar knife and sheath on Amazon. This is the same type of sheath that would later be found at the crime scene with his DNA on it. Moreover, phone records show that his cell phone pinged near the victim's home a disturbing 23 times in the months before the murders, strongly suggesting he was repeatedly casing the house. This reveals a terrifying pattern of behavior that suggests the attack was a horrific culmination of a calculated and targeted obsession. The horrific timeline of the attack began in the early morning hours of November 13th. Surveillance footage captured a white Elantra, a car matching Kohberger's, driving by the victim's house multiple times before and after the murders. Investigators also pieced together Kohberger's movements through his cell phone data, which showed his device was put on airplane mode for a 2-hour window, effectively making him invisible to tracking. The phone was only turned back on in a rural area south of Moscow after the murders, a calculated move that investigators believe was meant to conceal his location. The brutality of the murders was immediately evident to the first responders who arrived at the house on King Road. The scene was described as one of the most horrific they had ever encountered. In one of the most chilling details to emerge, the sheer amount of blood from the vicious attacks was so extensive that it was not contained to the interior of the home. The blood was reportedly dripping through the walls of the second floor and could be seen on the exterior of the house, a grim and shocking testament to the violence that had taken place inside. This detail underscored the savagery of the crime and the unimaginable chaos that unfolded that quiet November morning. The new documents reveal that a harrowing struggle took place on the second floor of the house. The first officers to respond to the scene found a large amount of blood and evidence of an intense struggle in Xana Kernodle's bedroom. It is believed that Xana went upstairs to check on Kaylee and Maddie and was then chased down the stairs by Kohberger. She suffered a staggering 50 stab wounds, most of which were classified as defensive wounds on her arms and hands. The documents also describe arterial blood spatter on the wall, indicating the sheer brutality of the attack. Officer Corbin Smith reported the following. When I arrived, I entered the residence and went to the second floor. I observed a female wearing a sweatshirt and underwear laying in middle of the bedroom floor covered in blood. I observed deep lacerations, indicative of defensive wounds, on the female's hands. The female was surrounded by blood on the floor. I observed a male laying on the bed. The male appeared to have suffered from stab wounds and a laceration to the neck. The male was covered in blood and the bedding around him was soaked in blood. Officers made their way upstairs to the third floor of the house where they discovered another horrific display of violence. The bodies of two females were laying in a bed. Later identified as Kaylee Goncalves and Madison Mogen, both young women had been stabbed multiple times. In the new documents, Officer Gunderson reported what he saw. On the third floor, I went to the southeast bedroom where Officer Nunes and Warner advised they found two females, whom I believe to be Kaylee and Madison. Both females were obviously deceased. I observed Kaylee lying on the north side of the bed, and Madison lying on the south side of the bed with their heads towards the east. Kaylee and Madison were covered by a pink blanket which was covered in blood. There was a large pool of blood near Kaylee's midsection. There was blood cast off on the east and north walls above Kaylee and Madison. Madison appeared to be laying up against Kaylee. Madison had what appeared to be wounds to her forearm and hands. Madison had a gash under her right eye, which appeared to go from the corner of her eye to her nose. Kaylee was unrecognizable as her facial structure was extremely damaged. Roommate Dylan Mortenson's account provided a crucial eyewitness detail to the tragic events. After hearing what she believed were sounds of a party and then later a commotion, she opened her bedroom door to investigate. Standing in the doorway, she saw a man in black clothing and a mask walking toward her. She described him as having bushy eyebrows. Despite this terrifying encounter, Dylan, in a state of shock, returned to her room and locked the door. The attacker, later identified as Bryan Kohberger, had already killed 4 people on the floor above and was likely exhausted from the brutal attacks. At this point, he may have also been in a hurry to leave, possibly believing the noise had already alerted others and that a call to the police was imminent. It wasn't until several hours later, the following day, that Dylan and the other surviving roommate, Bethany Funk, called the police after discovering Xana unconscious. The initial investigation appeared to hit a wall, with no murder weapon and little forensic evidence at the scene. However, a single critical piece of evidence was found, a tan leather knife sheath with a U.S. Marine Corps insignia on it. This sheath, discovered next to one of the victims, contained a touch DNA sample on its button. This sample was eventually identified as belonging to a lone male and became the key to unlocking the entire case. The discovery of this small, forgotten clue ultimately led investigators to their primary suspect. A massive nationwide search began for the white Elantra that was seen on surveillance footage around the crime scene. This vehicle became a crucial part of the puzzle, and the search quickly narrowed in on a car registered to Bryan Kohberger in Washington, a traffic stop that occurred months before the murders, where an officer pulled over Kohberger in the same white Elantra, provided police with body camera footage of the suspect and his vehicle, solidifying their focus.
Hey there. I stopped you going a little fast. You realize this is 35?
Oh, it's 35?
It is, yeah. So you're going...
41?
Yeah, 43 was what the radar said.
For future reference, I mean, I'm obviously an honest person, right? I told you I wasn't wearing my safety belt. When people lie to you about that, say I lied to you about that, right? Just for my own knowledge. You honestly go back and look at that, or you just...
I noticed you weren't wearing it, and I'm on this emphasis, and like I said, I'm getting paid by ICD, and they want us to enforce the seatbelt law, so I was...
The footage from this stop later became a powerful piece of evidence, placing Kohberger and his distinct car in the area prior to the crime. With a suspect and vehicle identified, investigators needed to confirm the DNA match. They used a common method known as a trash pull. Agents secretly retrieved garbage from the Kohberger family home in Pennsylvania, where he was visiting for the holidays. Inside the trash, they found a Q-tip from which they were able to extract a DNA sample from his father. This sample provided a familial match to the DNA found on the knife sheath, giving investigators the probable cause needed for an arrest and a search warrant to obtain a direct DNA sample from Kohberger himself. Despite being a Ph.D. student in criminology, Bryan Kohberger's actions at the crime scene were surprisingly sloppy and left a trail of crucial evidence. His presumed academic knowledge of forensics and criminal investigation seemed to vanish in the heat of the moment. The documents also mention that he left footprints in the snow outside the home, and that a black backpack was found in the backyard, possibly containing other items related to the crime. These careless mistakes are what ultimately allowed investigators to build a case against him, showing a stark contrast between his academic understanding of crime and his real-world execution. Officer Corbin reported the following. I was assigned to hold security at the rear slider door. This was the alleged point of entry of the suspect. I observed very large footprints in the snow. I used a tape measure, and the shoe size measured approximately 13.5 to 14 inches. The footsteps went to and from the rear slider door. I observed the trail of footsteps head away from the slider, then turn right, around a stump in the backyard, and lead toward the front of the house. I observed a set of small handprints on the window to the east of the slider. The screen to this window appeared damaged and was laying on the ground. I located smudged fingerprints on the glass slider door. There was a discarded black backpack in the backyard. I photographed these items and attached them to the case. Another new detail to emerge is that in the early morning hours following the murders, Kohberger's browser history showed that he searched for a police scanner website. Specifically, records revealed a search for the Pullman Police and Fire Dispatch live audio feed in the early morning hours following the attack. This search for a police scanner paints a picture of a man morbidly invested in the aftermath of his actions. Even after his arrest, Kohberger's behavior remained unsettling and strange. A fellow inmate at the county jail described Kohberger as having peculiar habits that quickly became annoying. These habits included washing his hands dozens of times a day and spending an inordinate amount of time, up to 45 minutes to an hour, in the shower. The inmate also noted that Kohberger would often stay awake all night, constantly moving around in his cell. This obsessive behavior, combined with an intense focus on his fellow inmates' criminal histories while refusing to discuss his own case, highlights a deeply disturbed and highly calculated personality.
And then let me ask you, did you, on November 13th, 2022, enter the residence at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, with the intent to commit the felony crime of murder?
Yes.
Did you, on November 13th, 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, kill and murder Madison Mogen, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
Did you, on or about that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Kaylee Goncalves, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
And did you, on that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Xana Kernodle, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
And then on or about November 13th, 2022, again in Latah County, Idaho, did you kill and murder Ethan Chapin, a human being?
Yes.
Did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
By pleading guilty to the 4 counts of murder, he avoided the death penalty and was instead sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. This decision brought an end to the highly anticipated trial, but also left a sense of justice not fully realized for some. The plea has sparked a debate among the public and the victims' loved ones about whether this was an appropriate outcome for such a heinous crime. Despite the conviction and sentencing, the central mystery of the case remains unanswered: the motive. Prosecutors never offered a clear motive for the killings, and Kohberger has remained silent on the issue. Theories abound, ranging from a desire for power and control to a possible connection to his studies in criminology. At the sentencing, the judge directly addressed this lingering question, urging the families to let go of the need for a reason. He stated that giving Kohberger's motive any weight or attention would grant him a form of agency and power that he does not deserve, and that the only thing that matters is that he will spend the rest of his life behind bars for the senseless loss of 4 lives. The sentencing hearing concluded with a series of powerful and emotional victim impact statements from the families and surviving roommates. In a raw and heart-wrenching display of grief and anger, they confronted Bryan Kohberger directly, detailing the profound and permanent void his actions had created in their lives. As they shared their stories, a final act of defiance against a crime that sought to silence their loved ones forever, Kohberger sat emotionless and stone cold. His unwavering composure stood in stark contrast to the tears and anguish of the families, creating a chilling and unforgettable moment in the courtroom.
Let me be very clear. Don't ever try to convince yourself you mattered just because someone finally said your name out loud. I see through you. You want the truth? Here's the one you'll hate the most. If you hadn't attacked them in their sleep, in the middle of the night, like a pedophile, Kaylee would have kicked your fucking ass. Thank you.
Thank you.
The case of Bryan Kohberger is a bewildering tapestry of bizarre behavior and chilling clues. From the unsettling premeditation revealed in his cell phone data, to the odd habits he exhibited in jail, the details paint a picture of a calculated and disturbed individual. While the sentencing has brought a form of closure, the absence of a clear motive leaves an enduring sense of unease. Bryan Kohberger will spend the rest of his life in prison, a consequence for the immense suffering he has caused. However, the true tragedy lies not in the mystery of his motive, but in the senseless and brutal loss of 4 bright young lives, a void that will forever remain for their families and community.